If you want talk, games, and fun all rolled into one, well, you've come to the right place. This is The Game Show, where host Bradley Clarke and his special guests talk about the world of television game and competition shows. But Bradley's guests aren't here to just talk. They came to play a game as well. What will today's topic be? What game does Bradley have planned? There's only one way to find out.
It's time to start the show.
You heard the man. Welcome to The Game Show. And here's your host, the Bradster himself, Bradley Clarke.
Yes, it's time to start the show yet again. Thank you so much, Austin Angelo. I'm Bradley Clarke, and welcome to another knowledge-filled episode of The Game Show, the talk show all about the world of television game and competition shows. And the reason I said knowledge-filled episode is because for the next hour, I'll be chatting with someone who definitely knows a thing or two about knowing things. Why do I say that? Well, because he is one of the most successful Jeopardy champions in the show's history and recently competed in the highly anticipated Jeopardy All-Star Games.
The Jeopardy All-Star Games are coming. Team members include David Madden, who won 19 consecutive shows in 2003, making him number 3 in Jeopardy rankings. Since his original appearances, David has founded several national and international academic competitions.
As you heard Sarah from the Clue Crew say, he is a 19-time Jeopardy champion, and he was a member of Team Brad for the Jeopardy All-Star Games, in which himself, Brad Rutter, and Larissa Kelly took home the championship and $1 million top prize. He is also the founder of the National History Bee and Bowl. Joining me right now on the game show to talk about his Jeopardy career so far is David Madden. David, how's it going?
It's going great, Bradley. Thanks very much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. First of all, I want to congratulate you on winning the Jeopardy All-Star Games.
Thank you very much. It was quite a thrill.
It must be such a relief now that you don't have to keep the information a secret anymore.
Well, it was about 2 months from when it taped until when it aired, so it was a pretty big secret to keep in for that time. But on my original run back in 2005, there was a 7-month gap in between when I taped and when my first shows aired, so I guess I have a little experience with this.
So you trained well for the keeping a secret part of Jeopardy.
Yep.
Well, actually, I want to let my listeners know that we actually met in an interesting way. Back in February, Alex Trebek came to New York to promote the All-Star Games, and he held an event at the 92nd Street Y in the city, which both of us attended. And I saw you in the crowd, and I had to come out to you because I've been watching you since I was a little boy on Jeopardy. And who knew that I'd be shaking the hand of the winner of the All-Star Games?
Well, I did, but I couldn't tell you at the time.
Right. But I'm so glad that now we can finally talk about it.
Sure. Cat's out of the bag.
Right, exactly. So we're going to talk about everything from your original run to the All-Star Games and what you do now with the National History Bee and the National History Bowl. And then later on, I have a special treat. I know you love trivia games. I mean, that's why you went on Jeopardy in the first place. So I have a Jeopardy-themed game ready for you to play.
All right.
So let's get into talking about Jeopardy. You ready?
Sure.
All right, here we go. So I want to start off by asking you, when did your love and fascination for Jeopardy first begin? Did you start watching as a kid?
Yeah, I was pretty young when I started watching. Oddly, I have much earlier memories of watching Wheel of Fortune, to be honest. That was a show that my family watched pretty much from the time I was in preschool onwards. But I got into Jeopardy, I think, when I was in middle school. I certainly remember watching it when I was about 11 or 12. And with each progressing year, I could figure out that I knew a little bit more each year. So that piqued my interest in the show. And then by the time high school came around and I was on my school's quiz bowl team, of course, that helped out a lot. And that's when I really got into it.
So when you joined your high school quiz bowl, was that when you realized that you have a knack for reading up on various topics and actually started to work on memorizing facts? Or do those traits of yours go back even further to when you were younger?
I've always had a very wide-ranging set of interests and a pretty good memory, so I guess it goes all the way back to elementary school. In particular, geography was my first love, and just studying capitals and countries and all of that. But as time went on, I branched out into history, art, music, literature, lots of other subjects as well. So I've always had pretty wide-ranging interests and a knack for trivia. When I was a ninth grader in high school, they put me on the varsity quiz bowl team right away, and that was a bit of a vote of confidence, I guess. And from there, it seems to have worked out pretty well.
And shout out to the tri-state area, New Jersey proud, I know.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm actually in my hometown at the moment, Ridgewood, over in Bergen County, and I went to Ridgewood High School here, graduated in '99.
Throughout my schooling process, I would be the one to create Jeopardy games and host Jeopardy for review sessions for exams. And if they didn't let me create the game and I had to play it, I would be the go-to guy. My teacher would go to me to make sure that all the rules were properly played. Were you at that as well? Did you create Jeopardy games throughout your schooling process?
I don't remember specifically creating games except once. In sixth grade, we were doing a unit on whales, of all things, my science class, and I did do a whale Jeopardy. What sticks out a little bit more is that in my ninth grade world history class, my teacher was a big fan of the show, and for review sessions, she always had us make questions and answers, and we would then play those as a review session. And she had a little rudimentary buzzer we would come up and play on, and I think the other kids were kind of scared to go up against me even back then.
So do you credit your Jeopardy success to your quiz bowling era of high school?
Absolutely. In fact, I think without that, I may have lasted a couple of shows, but there's no chance I would have lasted anywhere near as long as I did. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people who've been on the show. Ken Jennings, Brad Rutter, Larissa Kelly, Matt Jackson. We all got our start doing quiz bowl or academic competition. The big reason for that, more than anything, is just sort of an approach to learning. If you think about the way that students are usually tested in school and in university, you cram for an exam, and for a couple of days you're an expert on any particular topic, however specific it might be. But then, of course, that information largely vanishes from your short-term memory, so you can free it up for whatever your next exam is on. But when you're playing Quiz Bowl, every time you go to a tournament, in a sense, you almost have a test on everything. And while that may seem daunting, of course, people who write questions for Quiz Bowl tournaments want the questions to get answered. So, in effect, there's a lot of repetition from one tournament to another in terms of the material that comes up. And if you do well with Quiz Bowl and you study hard for it, what you're effectively doing is getting a lot of topics into your long-term memory. And then the nice thing about that is that once you get it into your long-term memory, it tends to then stay there. It's just a different approach to pedagogy, but if you take Quiz Bowl seriously and study a lot for it, as I did, then there's all of this seemingly random knowledge in so many different fields that just sticks with you. And whether it's poetry, geology, opera, art history, obscure geography and history facts, a lot of my knowledge base in that comes mostly from the work I did back in high school on the Quiz Bowl team. So much so that when I went on the show, both originally back in '05 and now again for the All-Star Games, 90% of the studying that I did for the show was actually pop culture, which for rather obvious reasons was not coming up in academic competition.
I always find that so interesting because a lot of players who I've seen interviews for say that the pop culture stuff is oftentimes the stuff that gets them. I remember Ken one time, one of his 75 interviews that he did with Alex during his run, Alex said to him, "Did you have to study up on anything before coming to Jeopardy?" He said he studied up on Harry Potter.
Yep. I also remember Ken being a teetotaling Mormon having to study the potent potables.
And the categories are potent potables.
Another thing I remember Ken's needing to study, but yeah, sort of along those lines, pop culture is also challenging, I think, even for those who are fans of TV shows and movies much more so than I am. And it's not that I don't like those topics or watching movies or TV, but I just have so little time to do it with my job that it's difficult for me to sort of have a natural knowledge base there. And that's magnified by the fact that pop culture is constantly evolving, of course, and now more than ever, of course, with all of the different ways that TV shows are made. You know, it used to be in the past you just had the networks and a few cable channels, and now everyone and their mother's got TV shows going on. So there's so much more out there, and it's difficult to stay on top of it all because every year, of course, you've got more movies, more shows, music, all of that in a way that, it's not to say that new operas aren't being written, but generally speaking, the ones that the show is at least asking about have stayed the same for years. So when you're talking geography, history, opera, classical music, art history, and many other subjects, there's a lot less turnover in terms of the material. So again, if you get it down once, then you're largely good to go. But with pop culture, you've got to stay on top of it, even if that's really your thing.
You mean to tell me that the David Madden is not going to do well in the rap category?
No, probably not too much, but I remember during my original run scoring a couple of clues off of the studying I had done, a couple in particular on country music, which I don't listen to all that frequently, but I remember specifically a question on George Jones coming up, and that was something I had studied a day or two before. So you never know. You got to keep your eyes open, your ears open. And I will say that, even for types of music or TV shows or movies that I don't myself listen to as much or watch as much, I still at some level have at least a passing interest in, since it's, important to know where our culture is going and to stay up on all the different trends that are going on. So, even if it's not the music I listen to relax or whatever, it's still culturally significant. And I think that's one of the nice parts of the show is that even when it's asking about popular culture, it's rarely in a total vacuum. It's usually stuff that people are talking about and, at some level is worth knowing.
So let's talk about your original run. Your first game aired on July 5th, 2005. What a day to celebrate the day after our nation's independence. And I know you didn't tell your parents about you actually going on the show, and they found out when the show actually aired. So what were their reactions when they heard Johnny Gilbert introduce you?
Well, unfortunately, my parents were just a little too nosy. My mom thought she was doing me a favor by opening a bank statement of mine to try and be helpful, and then she saw that there had been an ATM withdrawal out in Los Angeles. So I think her radar got activated through that, and then I believe my aunt went on the show's website the week before and saw that I was listed as one of the candidates. So truth be told, they knew a couple of days in advance, but I still managed to keep it a secret for quite some time. And when the first show actually aired, about 30 friends of mine and I did surprise my parents, and we watched the first show together at a watch party. But at the time of my first show, in fact, really throughout my original run, I was living in Berlin, Germany, doing my master's degree in international relations. And I had flown out the spring of '04 to try out for the show out in Los Angeles with none other than Larissa Kelly's husband, my friend Jeff Hoppus, who is, like me, a bird watcher. And we had gone to college together. Jeff, Larissa, and I were all college quiz bowl teammates. And I had a little money saved up and flew out to California for a birding trip. And it was only after the tickets had been booked that the thought crossed my mind to try out for the show. So originally it was almost a bit of an afterthought. But Jeff and I tried out together. He passed the test as well and had the misfortune to go on against Ken Jennings. So in a sense, Larissa, his wife, got a little revenge so many years later with our win in the All-Star Games. And as if all of that's not crazy enough, Jeff is a former high school teammate of none other than Brad Rutter. So while it was Team Brad in one sense, it was also sort of Team Jeff Hoppus in another, in that Jeff's birding buddy, his wife, and his former high school quiz bowl teammate were all playing together, which is ridiculous, really. But that was all back in 2004, and then my first show's taped December of that year. And then I had a 7-month-long wait while they were filming the Ultimate Tournament of Champions. So my original run corresponded with that, which gave me that much more time to study back then.
So you first began your Jeopardy journey during a very historic season. It was season 21 from September of 2004 to July of 2005. And at the start of that season, Ken Jennings was still the champion and only about halfway through his run. Also, starting in the middle of that season and lasting about 4 months was the Ultimate Tournament of Champions. And then you kick off your run in the tail end of the season. So as a loyal fan of the show for many years, does it make you proud to be part of such an historic Jeopardy season?
Sure, absolutely. And it was pretty unusual that I had such a long wait in between when my shows originally taped and then finally aired. I actually had the chance to ask Ken Jennings at the All-Star Games how long it lasted for him from when his first shows taped until his last shows taped. And Ken said that it was a period of about 3 months. So I guess I have a bit of a record over Ken and probably everyone else in that I was the real-time champion, in a sense, for actually over 7 months. And that's a record that will probably never be broken, at least not unless Jeopardy ever does another Ultimate Tournament of Champions where they've got such a hiatus. But I originally taped in December of '04, and then they brought me back in March of '05, and then back again in July of '05. So I had plenty of time in the meantime to study, and I was certainly fine with that.
So you were actually taping your final shows while your first shows were still airing?
Yeah, I'm one of a few contestants, Ken, I don't know, maybe Julia Collins might be another, though I'm not sure, whose shows actually sort of lapped each other in that regard, so that by the time my last 2 tape dates in July of '05 were going on, the contestants had seen me on the show the night before. So that was kind of cool, but I really just have the vagaries of the scheduling to thank for that.
Hey, any Jeopardy record is a Jeopardy record.
Yeah.
So when you were watching Ken's incredible run, did you ever imagine that you might have such a big championship run just like him?
I knew that I had the chance to do well on the show, although when I first went on, I think just about everybody who goes on the show, I wanted to win once. That was my big goal. As listeners may know, there's a rule that you can only go on Jeopardy once in your life, so you better not screw it up. And I knew that if I could get just the one win under my belt, then in many ways the pressure would be off. In a sense, that's what happened. I didn't play particularly well in my first show. I think I was about as nervous as I've ever been in my life. But once I got the first win under my belt, a lot of the pressure came off, and then everybody else was in the audience sort of watching me and then getting ready to go up against me and maybe feeling the butterflies themselves. So I was able to focus more and have more fun. And after that, my gameplay definitely improved.
Yeah, your first game was a nail-biter. You actually were in second place going into final, and you were behind by $600. And it's so interesting because I was looking back at your first episode, how you ended up where you were as a champion, because you decided to bet nothing on your final Jeopardy. Now,
that's right.
I know why you did that, but for the listeners who might not understand Jeopardy strategy, why don't you go ahead and explain why you did that? Because the third place player had 8,200, which was exactly half of what you had.
Right. And
the champion had 17,000. So go ahead and explain why you bet nothing.
Yeah, I actually made at least one mistake while playing the show, so in a sense I really should never have been in that position in the first place, and I guess I would have won quite a bit more in the first show if I hadn't. But as things turned out, I had 16-4, which is not a bad total, and it was exactly, as you mentioned, double what the guy in third place had. So at the time, Jeopardy had a rule that if you ended up with the same amount as another player in first place, then you would both come back and both get the money. So I figured, okay, well, I've done pretty well playing against him. If he doubles everything in Final Jeopardy, that's okay. I can live with being co-champs with him, and, we can come back together. And the woman who was just a little ahead of me, she had, I think, bet pretty aggressively on some of the daily doubles. So I was thinking she's probably a relatively aggressive player and is not going to just let the chance go by to put the game away. So I think she's probably going to go for it, and that's exactly what she did. And I basically have the image locked in my mind of her response of what is World War I coming up rather than Crimean War, which was the correct question. And I think that's the point where I knew, oh my, this is actually happening.
The woman you're referring to is Teresa Grasso. She was the champion that episode, and your other opponent's name was John Coulterman. Brad fact! And for any of the listeners that are curious, the Final Jeopardy category was wartime, and the clue was the Victorian Cross is made from metal taken from enemy guns captured in this war, with the correct answer being, what is the Crimean War? Now, just like yourself, your opponent John did respond correctly with what is the Crimean War, but were you surprised that he didn't bet at all? Because if he did, like you mentioned, you two would have been co-champions.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess he was figuring that since my score was relatively close to the first place player at the time, that we might bet against each other, and that his best chance was to just hope for a difficult clue that we would both whiff on and had to have bet aggressively against each other. So I can understand where he was coming from, although the category itself, wartime, is one that, okay, that's probably military history, is one that would have been to my liking. So had I been in his position, I think I would have bet the farm.
So after you won your first game, how confident were you that you could actually keep on winning? And as you mentioned, you got to see Ken's run. And once you won 2, 3, 4, 5 games, did you think, wow, this could actually happen? I could be the next big winner.
Yeah, after that first show, which was, as you mentioned, a nail-biter, I think the rest of my shows, since I played in the first show of the day and then played another 4 in quick succession after that, and I think all 4 of the other shows that day I won in runaways. So after the first game, I was just relieved, and then after the second game, I was like, okay, I think I've got the hang of this. And then the third game was one of the best games I had. A lot of clues came up that I really liked, and after that, it was really the sensation that, okay, I know how this game works. This this is all going well, and, I can just relax, keep my focus, and it all worked out. But again, a lot of the clues that I was pulling throughout my run were seemingly obscure, I guess, if those topics weren't necessarily your major interests. But for me, a lot of that material was standard topics from high school quiz bowl, just coming up in somewhat different form. I remember there was a category on various books and novels that I swept. And I think after I had swept the category, Alex looks at me and says, well, you must have done a lot of reading. And truth be told, I had only read one of the 5 books, but I had done a lot of reading in a different sense, that all of the books in that category were books that come up routinely in Quiz Bowl. And while some of them are relatively obscure, just, I guess, among the general population, if you play Quiz Bowl, this stuff is just standard fare. So, having the background there definitely helped on that category and in many, many others.
I think the craziest idea to think about when it comes to your original Jeopardy run, and certainly Ken's original run as well, is that had you been on 2 years prior, you would have been limited to just winning 5 games. Since prior to the start of season 20 in 2003, when the show changed the rules to let contestants win as many games as they can, champions can only stay on for 5 days. So in retrospective, you picked the right time to go on the show.
Yeah, and of course, that was out of my control that the show just made the decision at the right time. But what was interesting was that when I was in high school, specifically when I was 16, I remember watching the show, looking at some of the players in the teen tournament, looking at players in the college tournament, saying, okay, I could do that. But even back then, I knew that, again, you can only go on the show once in your life. And the teen tournament and the college tournament have clues that are somewhat more, if not pop culture, at least youth culture centered, which honestly doesn't play to my strengths as well. My comparative advantage would definitely be just on the normal shows. And knowing that, okay, well, I'm 16 now, as much as winning the teen tournament or college championship would be great, the competition for that is really tough because, again, a lot of the players on those shows are Quiz Bowl players or players who have some experience with academic competition. So on average, it's very difficult competition there. And I thought, okay, when a good year to be on the show would be when I'm 23, because I'll be right out of college. I could really use the money at that point, and I'll have all this knowledge in my brain that I'll have been studying throughout the remainder of high school and college. And as luck or fate would have it, when I went on the show, I was exactly 23. So I sort of predicted it, in a sense, 7 years out.
And also the teen tournament and the college championship has a fixed money amount win. So
right.
As a regular Jeopardy champion, you can control how much you win.
Well, I don't know if control is necessarily the right word, but certainly the ceiling is higher, or theoretically non-existent, I suppose. But in any event, yes, that was definitely another reason for wanting to go on the normal show, knowing that if things, for whatever reason, went really well, then there was more upside.
So after your 14th win, you had to wait a little while before continuing your run because the season was over. But were you glad to have a break during your run, or do you think the break actually hurt your overall momentum?
It's funny, my shows taped over 5 days, and all 5 days were relatively different. I mean, the first day, of course, was the whole first episode and just the nerves of that and just the surrealness of being on the show, and it doesn't really sink in until you're standing there at the podium, and even then, it's all sort of hard to process. But then after that first show, then I really got into a good groove, not only that day, but then the second day, which was the day right after that, on December 15 of 2004, and they taped only 4 shows that day. I'm not quite sure why. I guess they just needed a different number to fill the schedule. So they taped 4 shows the second day. I think I won all but one of those in a runaway as well. So after that second day of taping, when I had won 9 shows, I was starting to feel really confident. But then when I came back in March for just 1 day of shows, so 5 in March, I found the competition was either tougher or I was a little bit out of my rhythm or both. And I had a couple of tough games during that section, those 5 shows in March, but managed to pull them out. And then when they brought me back next was in July of 2005, so at this point my shows had started to air. And in the first show of the new year, I played it against a player by the name of Willie J., who I think was the strongest opponent of anybody I met in my original run. And he was in the lead over me going into Final Jeopardy. And I had played very well that game. I was just up against a great competitor, and he had just a little bit more money than me going into final, and I sort of lucked out because I was a lock for second, so I didn't have to worry about wagering against the third-place player. I just needed to cover Willie's bet on final. And the category was Broadway musicals. I've seen a number, but it's not one of my strongest categories, and both Willie and I missed it, and the player in third place got it, so I think she actually finished in second. But that was definitely a wake-up call at that point that, okay, my run probably isn't going to go anywhere near as long as Ken's, because that was actually the third game that I had won while trailing going into Final Jeopardy. And I mean, that's hard to do once, and to do it 3 times and escape was more than my fair share of luck. But I managed to win out that day, and then the first show of the following day, sort of all the luck that I had had for so many shows evaporated, and I had great opponents, one of whom's become a friend of mine in the years since. The other players found the daily doubles, they wagered aggressively, and yeah, just didn't work out. But obviously by that point, I had nothing to complain about.
Well, I can tell why, because you won 19 games and $430,400 plus $2,000 for coming in second place on your 20th game. And as someone who studies the history of Jeopardy and loves to look at patterns when it comes to records and winning streaks, I find it fascinating how both you and Ken lost on milestone games. If you didn't lose the game that you did, it would have been win number 20, and if Ken didn't get beat by Nancy Zerg, he would have secured his 75th win. However, from what you just said, I'm guessing not making it to win number 20 or win number 75 didn't really matter to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember at that point, that was the first show that while I was disappointed that I had finally lost, I remember having a good time for the rest of that day, talking with the other contestants, seeing some of them go on to win, and there were no tears in my eyes, to put it mildly.
So let's talk about the Jeopardy All-Star Games, which was such a fun tournament to watch, not only because of the players who were involved, but because of how uniquely structured the tournament was. It was the first time former Jeopardy players competed as teams, and that each game featured 9 players as all 3 team members played a round during each game. What was also cool was that all 6 of the team captains drafted their 2 additional players during a special Facebook Live broadcast. So before the draft took place, did you have in mind which captain you were hoping would select you and which other player you were hoping you would be on the same team with?
Well, I think probably everybody who was eligible to be drafted was hoping that they'd get a chance to play with either Brad or Ken for somewhat obvious reasons. I was kind of interested to see where I would get picked. In looking at the different players in the draft, I sort of figured that I had a chance of going as high as 4 and as low as maybe 8. So to have been picked 7th didn't come as a real surprise, but frankly, I was very happy to fall as low as I did. In a sense, the later you get picked in the draft, it's that much more likely that the other players on your team are going to be that much stronger. So when Brad had the 6th and 7th pick, and I was still unpicked after about, the 4th pick or so, I was thinking, this could potentially work out. And then Brad's first pick was Larissa, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. And then after Larissa got picked, I was thinking, okay, I think there's a real shot here that he's going to select me with his next pick. And in fact, I don't know if it really entered into Brad's calculations, but I've known Brad since 2006 when we worked at an academic tournament together. So going back a ways, I thought was good for team chemistry, and Brad knew that I was definitely involved in the world of academic competition professionally, as is Larissa as well, for that matter. And Brad even then later alluded to that as being one of the reasons he picked both of us. And in fact, Brad said at one point that it was a bit of a no-brainer to pick Larissa and me, which I was gratified by.
I guess, Brad, that's you.
So I get to make 2 picks.
You
Great.
get to make 2 picks in a row.
And I'm prepared for just this eventuality. That's why I grind all the tape, I study the traits, I measure the hands and the knee circumference. I'm well prepared.
And that's all it takes? Just that kind of research?
Yeah, that's why I watch all that tape.
All right.
27 hours of tape study this week, Al.
Oh, my gosh. All right, you take this seriously, as everyone does, I'm sure. So the number 6 pick is...
I'm looking for somebody who might be flying a little bit under the radar here, but is excellent. And that's why I watched all the tape. I went back and looked at it. And but for a bit of bad luck, this person could be one of the all-time legends. Already is one of the all-time legends, but could be even more highly regarded. And I'm talking about Larissa Kelly.
Larissa, quiz programs, quiz setups have become part of your life. You and your husband are co-owners of NAQT?
Yes, that's
What
right.
exactly is that?
Well, we actually like to describe it as Jeopardy, but for teams. And now we can just describe it as Jeopardy.
And is it true that Ken is one of your partners in that venture?
And Ken is another co-owner of NAQT. And Brad and my husband Jeff actually went to high school together. So it turns out this is fated.
Yeah.
All right. That's great. Now, Brad, you get to make the number 7 selection.
Number 7 is somebody I watched in his original run and was very impressed with, and have continued to be impressed with as I've gotten to know him over the years. Dave Madden, come on down.
Well, just talking to Larissa about NAQT. You operate something similar to NAQT, international quiz competitions. In fact, I hear that you spend very little time back here in the United States. You're traveling, you and your wife, all over the world. Is that right?
That's right, Alex. We actually probably spend about half the time in the U.S. and half the time abroad, but we run international academic competitions. It's somewhat similar to NAQT. Most of our competitions have a history or geography focus, though, and we're in about 30 countries around the world now.
As you look around at all of the players in our Jeopardy All-Stars, how many of them have you asked to prepare clues for you and your tournaments?
I'm not sure if anybody's actually written questions for us, but I know any number of the people here, including Brad and Larissa, have helped us out at reading questions, sort of playing your role at our tournaments.
Okay, well, thank you. Good luck.
I think I also, in the wake of the tournament, saw a tweet by Ken that said something to the effect of he had both Larissa and me in his top 5. Now, Ken had the 3rd pick and went with Matt Jackson, and Matt played very well in the tournament. So I don't think Ken regrets having picked Matt at all. And in fact, Matt falling even to the 3rd spot, while understandable in that the 2 players ahead of him, Roger, Craig, and Alex Jacob, I don't think anybody can argue too much with them being the first 2 picks. After Matt had been selected as the 3rd pick, I guess Ken's 4th and 5th picks were either Larissa and me or vice versa. So I think when Ken saw that Brad got both of us, he knew that the competition was going to be pretty tough. But when we saw Ken had been able to select Matt, and Monica was certainly a great player too, as his 3rd pick, their deck was pretty stacked as well. But all of the teams were very strong, and there's certainly quite an element of luck in the game in terms of who finds the daily doubles, who's going to wager aggressively. So I think if they reran the tournament any number of times over, every single one of the teams that was there could have had a shot at winning it.
One of the elements about the All-Star Games I noticed immediately was the fact that all 18 players in the tournament were relatively newer players when you look at Jeopardy's timeline in a grand scale. You didn't have any players going back to the earlier years of the show like you had with the Battle of the Decades. So were you surprised to not see people like Chuck Forrest or Frank Spankenberg?
Honestly, I wasn't too surprised by the selections of the producers in terms of who came on the tournament. Since they had done the Battle of the Decades not too long ago, and of course the Ultimate Tournament much longer before that, but still that being another tournament where they went back to the start of the Trebek era for their contestant selections, it didn't shock me that they looked to go for, on the whole, contestants who had been on the show more recently. I was certainly one of the contestants whose original run had been farthest back. I was not honestly able to compete in the Battle of the Decades because I had a contractual obligation that prevented me from doing so, but thankfully that had lapsed by the time Jeopardy got in touch with me for the All-Star Games, and once I verified with them that everything was all good, I was delighted to be back. So I think everybody that was at the tournament definitely had a very good justification for being there. I think the 6 players that they picked as team captains made total sense, each and every one of them. So obviously it all worked out well for me, but I can see that the producers probably probably wanted to give some newer names a chance at a tournament. Players like Buzzy and Austin, who had not had a chance to compete yet in a tournament beyond their standard Tournament of Champions. So yeah, I mean, I think the show always has a tremendous roster of talented players to pick from, but I'm happy that my name came up on this tournament for sure.
Out of curiosity, did you realize when you stepped onto the stage for the draft that Kelly Miyahara, who was doing the announcing duties for the Facebook Live draft, but is also a member of the Clue Crew, said that you won 19 games in 2003 and not 2005?
He won 19 consecutive shows in 2003, making him number 3 in Jeopardy rankings. And academic competition director, David Madden.
Hey, Captains. After my Jeopardy run, I set up the National History Beat, and now I'm back to make more Jeopardy history as your teammate.
That probably would have struck me at the time, but I think I have a vague recollection of it.
Even though Kelly said the wrong year, she did give a correct fact by saying that you won 19 consecutive games of Jeopardy. And since we're still on the topic of the draft, why don't you talk about how fun the draft selection process actually was for you?
The draft was a lot of fun back in September, and it was very odd sort of feeling to be out in Culver City with all of these phenomenal contestants, but we honestly weren't out there to play Jeopardy, at least just yet. So it was a lot of fun to get a chance to mingle with the other contestants, and then after the draft, get a chance to plot at least some initial strategy. To be totally honest, because I'm so busy with my work these days, I honestly hadn't really thought I was going to put in all that much effort into studying. And prior to the draft, I watch the show a little bit more frequently than I normally do. I catch it as often as I can, but I'm out of the country about half the time just running events around the world. So it's a little harder for me to keep up with it than for some players. But I honestly didn't think I was going to study all that much for it, but when I saw who my teammates were and that I was playing with two players who I had been friends with for years and with whom we definitely had a good chance of doing well. And then on top of all that, the pressure of maintaining the Brad Rutter undefeated streak was now on my shoulders. I couldn't let Brad down and let Larissa down, so I definitely studied a lot more after knowing who I was going to be playing with. But as things would have it, not a single thing that I studied came up specifically in my shows when I was playing. Any number of the things that I studied did come up while other players were playing, so it wasn't all for naught. And some of what I've studied, I have seen in the news or seen in other trivia competitions since then, so it's all good stuff to know. But I probably put in about 250 hours of preparation, almost all of which was between September and early January when the show's taped. And yeah, not a single thing that I studied came up.
What I find really fascinating was you also went back to the tape. You were almost like a sports analyst, and you studied your games and Larissa's games and Brad's games, and what the right structure of who would play what round and what game would be best. Talk about that a bit.
Sure. So it was pretty clear that Brad being phenomenal on the buzzer, it would make sense for him to maximize his buzzer time. So Brad playing double Jeopardy on day 2 and single Jeopardy on day 1, that made a lot of sense and was pretty clear. Larissa and I, as one might surmise from us having been the 6th and 7th picks, are relatively evenly matched in terms of our knowledge bases. And I went through, I think, about 20 different episodes from various tournaments. There's a website, the name of it escapes me, but Larissa clued me into it, where you can just go through and play the questions of past tournaments. And you can mark how many you get right, how many you get wrong, how many you would just not buzz on. And Larissa and I were very evenly matched on that. I think over 20 shows that I tracked our totals on, I think we got the exact number of Final Jeopardies right. I think we both went 16 for 20. And in the single Jeopardy games, my scores in the shows that, I was comparing against her totals were very slightly better than hers. I mean, I was maybe averaging one answer correct more per game. But in the double Jeopardy game, she was a little bit more ahead of me. She was, I think, averaging about 2 answers correct more per me. So once I saw that, it became quite clear that it made more sense for her to be playing double Jeopardy and for me to do single. And then since Brad was going to do the buzzer in single and double Jeopardy, it was clear that Larissa and I would each do Final Jeopardy, which I'm fine with. I've always done pretty well with Final Jeopardy and had no problems doing that either. So we definitely went through and reviewed it. I think some of the The other teams may have spent even more time. I think Matt Jackson mentioned something like hundreds of thousands of flashcards. I mean, nobody on our team did anywhere near that level of preparation. But I think we were very smart about it. We all have busy lives, and we didn't have time to devote ourselves full time to the show in terms of preparation. But we looked at what we needed to look at, and obviously it worked out well for us.
So your first match, you were against Team Buzzy and Team Colby, and you won with 58,200. And then in the finals, you went up against Team Ken and Team Colby, who was the wild card winner. So at the end of the first day, you had $36,000, and then you had $34,000 in the second game for the 2-day total of $70,000. But going into final on the second day, you had a runaway. So what was the moment where it sank in that you three were going to be the winners of the All-Star Games, even without having to do Final Jeopardy, technically?
Team Brad couldn't be caught today. They are a $1 million champion. The string is unbroken. What a tournament. What a tournament. Yes, indeed.
So proud of you guys. Oh, so proud.
It was an interesting game just sitting there watching it because, of course, in these all-star games, we're all searching for the daily doubles, and we're all very comfortable jumping around the board to the categories we like. So in contrast with the standard manner on the show of selecting the easiest clues first at the top and then sort of working your way down into the category, we were jumping all over the place, and this was something that everybody was doing. And that meant that towards the end of that Double Jeopardy round, all of the $400 and $800 clues were the ones that were left. So these clues that had relatively low value suddenly took on extreme importance because we knew that it was going to be pretty close to a runaway, and it largely was just going to come down to who got recognized on the buzzer. And every time I kept thinking, Ken's going to get in on this, and Ken's going to get in on this, and Brad somehow managed to outbuzz Ken more often than not. And I have to go back and analyze the match because I don't think it was on the very last clue, but it was either the penultimate or the antepenultimate. Maybe you've looked at it already, I don't know. But with about 2 or 3 clues to go, I thought we had it. And then by the last one, I knew we did. And then I just turned to Larissa and said, we've got this in a runaway. I think Larissa was very happy to not have the pressure on her shoulders when she went up for the last Final Jeopardy. So I think she was particularly happy about that. But a lot of it came down to Brad finding the daily doubles and getting them right. But one thing that I think we did particularly well with as a team throughout the tournament, and certainly in the last match with Brad and Larissa playing in Double Jeopardy, they made perfect wagers. The wagering was just spot on. The amounts that we were putting down were aggressive, but not foolish. They were amounts where if it didn't work out, we'd still be able to bounce back and be in good position. So we weren't totally betting the farm, but at the same time, if it did work out, we were putting ourselves in a position where we could get into a runaway, and that's indeed what happened.
Computer science, 1200.
Daily double. Colby's encouraging you to do it. I know what he means.
I am not going to do it. 4,000, please. What are operators?
Operators is right.
10,000.
Okay.
What is the French and Indian War?
You have just added to your score.
So you, Larissa, and Brad won the Jeopardy All-Star Games, meaning you got to split the $1 million prize amongst the three of you. But I'm very curious, with your portion of the win, does it take your all-time Jeopardy money total to $775,733.33 or 34 cents?
33 cents.
It is 33.
Brad got the extra penny for being team captain, but I didn't. I'm still sort of in a state of shock that not only did everything work out as well as it did throughout this tournament, but just the fact that I got a chance to come back and play again. My dad put together a whole journal of his reminiscences of all of my original shows, and this has been a treasured keepsake of mine since back in 2005. And that book has sat on my bookshelf in my bedroom for the last 14 years, and I assumed that that was the end of it. And now he gets a chance to write the sequel. In fact, my father today was working on his reminiscences of the All-Star Games tournament. And in contrast with my original run, where I hadn't yet met my wife at the time, and my parents didn't see any of my original shows, I had both my wife and my parents in the audience for the All-Star Games, and that made it particularly meaningful for me that they were able to see that in person. But I was telling my dad, I think I have 4 records on the show that either will never be broken or will be very hard to break. One of them I mentioned earlier, just having been the real-time champion for over 7 months with regards to the time from when my original shows taped to when I finally lost. But the other records are going something like 45 for 47 on daily doubles, which is just crazy because when I watch the show at home, I don't do nearly that well. So that worked out well. The other two records, they brought me back to beta test Watson at IBM headquarters back in 2010, and I was the only player to go undefeated in multiple games against it. So I'm 2-0 against Watson, and I'm never playing that thing again because by now I'm sure it would just blow all us humans out of the water. But then I think the fourth record I have now is that you'd have to verify this from players from the 80s, but I'm pretty sure that I have the longest time from my original show until my first tournament win, since it's almost been 15 years. My original shows aired in July of 05, and this now airing in February, March of 19. So I guess about 13 and a half, but that's still probably the longest of anybody, at least that I can think of.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up because now that I'm thinking about it, if Ken would have won, then he would have had that record.
That's right, yeah.
Because he's never won a tournament.
Which is kind of incredible to think about with all the success he had, but they've certainly brought him back now for 3 tournaments plus the Watson games, but every time there's been Brad Rutter standing in his way. So at least so far, Brad's tournament streak is still intact. And I don't know what's more impressive now. I mean, the 74-match win streak is just such an anomaly, but so is Brad's tournament streak. I mean, to be able to have won your original Tournament of Champions, the $1 Million Masters, the Ultimate Tournament of Champions, the Battle of the Decades, and now the All-Star Games, that's maybe even more incredible. I don't know.
And who knows what they're going to do for season 40?
Who knows?
During the time of the All-Star Games, did you have a chance to congratulate 20-game winner Julia Collins for beating your 19-game winning record?
Yeah, I did have a chance to interact with her. I've actually met Julia before at various academic tournaments, and that was after her original run. But I always root for a new up-and-coming champion. I think it always puts a little energy into the show, and while I know that sort of means by definition that if somebody's winning day after day, it means that many more people's Jeopardy dreams are being dashed. It's, of course, exciting to see how long someone can stay on the show for. And Julia got me by one, but she's a wonderful person, and I've enjoyed getting to know her.
And speaking of history, let's talk about what you do now, which is really fascinating. So you're the founder and the executive director of the National History Bee and the National History Bowl. Why don't you describe what they are and how you came up with the concept for the competitions?
Sure. So again, as I mentioned at length, I was very active in high school quiz bowl. And after Jeopardy, I had flexibility to figure out what I wanted to do as a career. And I went back and was in the process of becoming a history teacher and at the same time had the idea just for fun of running a history quiz tournament. This is back in 2009. And I approached the principal of my former high school just with the idea of holding a history quiz tournament for fun for kids from around the New York City area. And we had almost 150 students come in for this back in May of 2010, and it was so much fun to put this all together that rather than becoming a history teacher in the usual sense, I, in the wake of that first tournament, set up the National History Bee, which is an individual student competition, and the National History Bowl, which is a team competition. And that was now almost 10 years ago, and we have not sat still, we have not looked back, and I don't think we ever will, since in the intervening years, that has now grown to become not just the National History Bee and Bowl, but our sort of umbrella organization is International Academic Competitions. And we're active now in about 30 countries around the world. We have a tournament coming up in Qatar in a week and a half, in Hong Kong the week after that. We have tournaments in Asia, Australia, Europe, Canada, all over the USA. And it's branched out from history now, too, so that we also run the U.S. Geography Olympiad and the International Geography Bee. Now we're also doing the National Science Bee and the U.S. Academic Bee and Bowl. So those are subjects beyond what we were originally doing, but everything's working out very well. Every year we have more students and more schools that are participating, and it's just been a tremendous experience to grow and develop it. And what's been particularly gratifying is to see any number of the students that have played in our competitions then go on and do well in the teen tournament or the college championship. And in fact, a few of our staff members now have some Jeopardy success to their names too. I can count no fewer than 3 staff members in particular who started off playing our tournaments and then went on to do well on the show.
Do any of the student contestants recognize you from Jeopardy?
Yeah, every now and then I'll get requests for selfies or autographs at tournaments, but I try and keep the focus on them at the tournaments as much as possible because it's really about their experiences and them getting excited about academic competition. And for me, really, while the whole Jeopardy experience has just been absolutely a highlight of my life, what's been far and away the most meaningful and relevant long-term legacy of that has been the fact that in the wake of my original run, I started first helping out again as a volunteer reader at various quiz tournaments and then had the idea to set this up now. And we're reaching tens of thousands of students on an annual basis. They're getting excited about learning. They're getting excited about delving into new subjects, academic competition, having fun with it, making friends with like-minded interests. And it's really a labor of love. And I work routinely 100-hour weeks and have done so for years, but no burnout whatsoever because this is a passion of mine, and it's just so much fun to see new kids come up and get excited about it.
And it must be such a fun feeling not having to be the contestant, but you're rather the host. You're the Alex Trebek in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to be on the other side of the buzzer. In particular, it was at times a little terrifying being back on the All-Star Games because running, especially history and geography competitions for a living, heaven forbid, students and their coaches and parents would say, who's this guy who's purporting to run the National History or the U.S. Geography Olympiad, and he's missing these history and geography questions. Could have hurt us, But thankfully, it all worked out very well, and the very fact that I do it for a living definitely helped in terms of my confidence on the show and my ability to put down some pretty big wagers when, thankfully, history and geography came up as my two final Jeopardies.
So what's next for your game show career? Would you like to compete on more quiz shows in the near future?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm always up for something like that. I'm so busy with what I'm doing professionally that it's not something I'm actively seeking out. But if people come and approach me, I'm hopefully going to be able to say yes to them. I will say that I'm fluent in German, and it's sort of a lifetime goal of mine to go on a German language quiz show. Whether I do well or not is almost besides the point because I would probably get tripped up on some silly question on German pop culture. But just to be able to go on a German language quiz show is probably the number one item on my quiz show agenda for the rest of my life, at least.
Before we get to the game, I think we should mention, recently we heard the sad news about how Alex Trebek just got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I hope I speak on your behalf as well, how we're all rooting for Alex, that he gets better.
Absolutely.
And we hope many more years of Jeopardy are in your future.
For sure, yeah. A bunch of the All-Star contestants and I are in the process of sending him some well wishes, and obviously everybody's pulling for him as best as we can. He's a tremendous human being in addition to being a tremendous host of the show, and he's been in the public eye for so many years, not a whiff of scandal, just perfect class, and he's been the embodiment of the show for so long, and of course that's why it's done so well. So we're all pulling for him.
Well, that is certainly the case for me as well. Hashtag Trebek strong. Well, David, we've reached my favorite portion of the game show. Are you ready to try your hand at a Bradley Clarke original game?
Sure, let's do it.
Well, it's time for the game of the day.
Game of the day.
And I know you love history so much, so I had to combine both history and Jeopardy into a game. So I have created a game that I'm fittingly titling The History of Jeopardy. The History of Jeopardy.
Okay.
And so here's how the game works. I have 5 categories in front of me, each with 3 clues, one valued at 200 points, one at 400 points, and one at 600 points. Now, all the categories, answers, and questions will have something to do with an aspect of Jeopardy's incredible history. Now, you're going to pick a category, and your goal is to give a correct response to all 3 clues. Now, we'll start with the 200-point clue and go down the column. However, if at any time during the category you give an incorrect response, you'll be forced to pick another category, and any clues left in that category will be forfeited.
Okay.
To win, your goal is to accumulate at least 3,000 points or more, and to help you out, there is a daily double somewhere behind one of the clues.
All right.
So, you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's play The History of Jeopardy! And here are your 5 categories. the original Jeopardy, Jeopardy in pop culture, and I guess we'll see if pop culture will once again be your nemesis or if you'll prove yourself wrong.
We'll see.
We will see indeed. Next category is celebrities on Jeopardy, legendary Jeopardy champions, and my favorite category of all time, stupid answers.
Stupid answers. You know, I've always thought that probably the hardest questions to write have got to be the hardest answers and questions in the stupid answers category. Because it's easy to come up with a stupid answer that's pretty just stupid, right? But, you know, for like $1,000 or $2,000 stupid answer, that's got to be pretty clever.
You know, I never actually thought of it that way. You're right. Because for $1,000, it has to be stupid, but it can't be too easy since it's still one of the highest value clues in the Jeopardy round.
Yeah, right?
So which category would you like to start with first?
Well, let's get it out of the way. Let's do Jeopardy and pop culture.
Jeopardy and pop culture, okay? And I'm sure I don't have to remind you this, but I will just for formalities. Since all these clues are written Jeopardy style, remember to answer in the form of a question.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, let's start with your first clue of the game. For 200 points, the answer is... Bill Murray knew all of the correct responses after watching the same Jeopardy episode over and over again in this movie.
What is Groundhog Day?
What is Groundhog Day? That is the correct question for 200 points. Fantastic beginning.
This country's largest lake, Chapala, is located near the city of Guadalajara.
What is Mexico?
Leslie.
What is Mexico?
Correct.
Lakes and Rivers 400.
Seneca is the largest of these lakes in west central New York.
What are the Finger Lakes?
Jim.
What are the Finger Lakes?
Correct.
Lakes and Rivers for 600.
This South American lake drains into the smaller lake
What is Titicaca?
in Bolivia. Jim.
What is Titicaca?
Correct.
Lakes and Rivers for 1,000.
Milky colored from
What is the
glacial
Rhone?
clay when entering Lake Geneva, this river is clear blue upon exiting. Jim.
What is the Rhone?
The Rhone, good for $1,000. You are $500 off the lead right now.
Let's go to Inventors for 200.
For 400 points, Adam West wrote down Kebert Zella for his final Jeopardy response, sending Alex Trebek back to the fifth dimension on this TV show.
Well, it's not Batman. Now, I know he was in animated show as well. So, what is American Dad?
Oh, you picked the wrong one. What is Family Guy?
Oh, sweetie, you look so handsome on TV.
I can't believe you actually won. But I suppose it's not the strangest thing I've seen on a game show, like when Adam West was on Jeopardy.
All right, players, the answer once again is it was the first spacecraft to land on the surface of Mars. Adam, what was your response? Kebert Zella.
Only saying his name backwards can send him back to the fifth dimension where he belongs.
Oh, it is Family. All right, well, we're out of that.
No worries. Which category next?
Let's go over to Original Jeopardy.
The Original Jeopardy. Here we go, 200 points. Studio 6A at the NBC studios in this city was where the Original Jeopardy taped.
What's New York City?
New York City is correct for 200 more points. You have 400, and we're moving on to the 400-point question. This legendary announcer was the voice of the Original Jeopardy for all 2,743 episodes. He also had an announcing gig on Saturday nights.
Who is Don Pardo?
Don Pardo, a legend in the industry, correct.
Jeopardy presents today's three contestants. This is Miss Kim Elam from New York City. This is Mr. Kent Jarrell from Vienna, Virginia. And this is our champion, Mrs. Karen Streisman from Freeville, New York. These three people will compete today on Jeopardy! And now, here's the star of Jeopardy, Art Fleming.
Good morning. Thank you, players. Thank you, Don Pardo. Thank you, my friends. Good morning. I hope it's a good one for you. Thank you. The contestants for the day, good morning, players. Look at the board now as we all play Jeopardy. Thank you.
You have 800 points total, and this one, to sweep the categories, worth 600 points. It was the dollar amount for the fifth clue in a category during the single Jeopardy round on the original version.
What is $50?
$50. In this day and age, I'm sure a lot of people won't believe it, but it is $50. You got it.
All right.
You are about halfway there. You have 1,400 points, and you still have 3 categories left. Which one next?
Let's go over to Celebrities on Jeopardy.
Celebrities on Jeopardy. And here comes your 200-point question. Thankfully, he didn't go up in smoke when this actor won the first ever Celebrity Jeopardy tournament in October of 1992.
Who is Cheech Marin?
Cheech Marin is correct. And he has the distinction of beating the one and only Anderson Cooper on Jeopardy as well. Brad fact.
Cheech, you're the winner today. Your charity will get $50,000, and Aisha and Anderson's charities $25,000 each.
You have 1,600 points for 400 points. He had the magic touch when using the buzzer, winning a Celebrity Jeopardy episode in 2015. His partner would have no chance of winning since he doesn't speak.
Oh, who is Penn Jillette?
Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller is correct.
Did you come up with the correct response?
I don't think so.
You said, who is Leonard Nimoy? No, who is Patrick Swayze?
Of course,
So
but I still
if-
win. So
Well,
who cares?
only if you lost, well, you didn't lose too much.
Yes, I know what
So
I
your
got.
charity, Opportunity Village, is going to receive $50,000.
You call that applause? You call that applause? Thank you.
You have 2,000 points. You're only 1,000 away from the target. And your 600-point answer is actually the Daily Double.
All right.
So you have 2,000 points. This is the only question where you can lose something if you get it wrong. So you're 1,000 away. I don't know what you want to do. How much you want to bet?
I'm going to be pretty conservative here and just go 600 because I'm in pretty good shape.
All right, a wise wager. So for 600 points, the answer is... He's best known for standing to the side of another celebrity, but this comedian was front and center when playing Celebrity Jeopardy in both 1999 and 2009.
Who's Ed McMahon?
No, but you had the right idea. Who's Andy Richter?
Oh, Andy Richter. Yeah, that's right.
All right, let's find out what our celebrities know about directors. Here comes the clue. Appropriately, the 100th anniversary of this director's birth was on a Friday the 13th, August 13th, 1999. You have 30 seconds. Good luck. Andy, he was leading with 12,200. Alfred Hitchcock there? You better believe it. And his wager. Everything. All right. 24,400. You're the winner today. We have 5,000. Your charity gets 29,400.
Andy Richter is Conan O'Brien's late-night sidekick and a very smart Jeopardy player.
That's true.
So good that you only wagered 600 on that Daily Double. You're down to 1,400 and we have 2 categories left. Which one would you like to face next?
Okay, well, let's go over to Stupid Answers then.
Stupid Answers. For 200 points, you'll be saying, "Oh, rats," if you don't know that this was the first correct response on the first ever syndicated episode of Jeopardy.
What are rats?
Correct.
If you're ready, then let us play Jeopardy! And this time, as I indicated, with answers ranging in value from $100 to $500, here are the 6 categories you're going to be dealing with in this first round. Lakes and rivers, inventions, animals, foreign cuisine, actors and roles, and number, please. Since we do not have a returning champion on the program today, we drew numbers, and the winner was Greg, and that means you have the honor of selecting the first category and the first amount. Good luck, Greg.
Thank you, Alex. I'll take animals for 100, please.
Our very first answer is these rodents first got to America by stowing away on ships. Greg.
What are rats, Alex?
That is absolutely right.
For 400 points, teenager Claire Sattler was the 2018 winner of this Jeopardy tournament.
What is the teen tournament?
Very good. You're back up to 2,000, and this is to get you to 2,600 for 600 points. This super tournament, airing in the summer of 1990, offered a $250,000 cash prize to the winner.
What is Super Jeopardy?
That is correct. Very good.
This is Super Jeopardy, the conclusion of the $250,000 challenge. Now entering the studio are our finalists. A high school administrator from Medford Lakes, New Jersey, Dave Traney, who has won $70,502. A writer from Piedmont, California, Bruce Seymour, who has won $55,989. And a playwright, actor, and director from New York City, New York, Bob Verini, whose total winnings are $146,802. And now, here is the host of Super Jeopardy, Alex Trebek.
Thank you, Johnny Gilbert. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final game in our Super Jeopardy Summer Tournament. This event got underway 12 weeks ago with 35 of the very best Jeopardy players of the past 6 seasons, plus a Jeopardy champion from the original series way back in the 1960s.
You have 2,600 points, which means you need to get the first 2 correct at least to win.
Okay.
Coming down to the wire. Legendary Jeopardy champions. For 200 points, he finished in 3rd place during the Jeopardy Ultimate Tournament of Champions.
Who is my friend Jerome Vered?
Correct. And here we go. You have 2,800 points. This is for the win.
All right.
For 400 points. A 5-time Jeopardy champion and a participant in various tournaments, he wrote a book titled Prisoner of Trebekistan, A Decade in Jeopardy.
Who's another friend of mine? Who is Bob Harris?
For the win, it is Bob Harris. David, you have won this game of the History of Jeopardy.
All right. Do I get the 3rd question in the last category as my grand prize?
Of course you do. Of course. This was the 600-point question in Legendary Jeopardy Champions. In 1994, she became the first woman to ever win the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions.
I'm kind of glad that I got out of here when I did. Who's Leslie Shannon?
No, who is Rachel Schwartz.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, okay. I did it just in time. I was wise to, I guess, wager no more than 600 on that.
Well, I've always known you to be a smart daily double wagerer, and your Jeopardy skills paid off once again right here on The Game Show. Well, David, congratulations once again on winning, and thanks for playing the game of the day, the History of Jeopardy.
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. Appreciate it.
The History of Jeopardy. Well, David, it has been such a pleasure having you on the game show to talk about Jeopardy. And once again, congratulations on winning the All-Star Games.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
And you always have an open invitation to come back onto the game show to talk Jeopardy and to talk whatever you like, or if you just want to play another game.
All right, I'll keep it in mind.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, David, so much. Congratulations again, and I look forward to seeing you once again on Jeopardy or that German quiz show that you'll eventually get on.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, well, David, take care, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot. It was fun.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Well, that sound means it's time to put down my signaling device because this episode of the game show has come to an end. My thanks once again to 19-time Jeopardy champion and Jeopardy All-Star Games winner, David Madden, for being my special guest today. Now, are the Jeopardy juices still flowing inside of you? Well, if the answer is yes, you can listen to this episode again, as well as my episode featuring Jeopardy's biggest money winner and the Jeopardy All-Star Games winning captain, Brad Rutter, by logging on to www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke, that's BRADLEY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. That's www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke, that's BRADLEY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. Plus, don't forget to like The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Facebook and follow The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Twitter using the handle @TheGameShowBC and #TheGameShow. But of course, be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode of The Talk Show, all about the world of television game and competition shows, The Game Show. I'm Bradley Clarke, the Bradster, and I'm going to go calculate my final Jeopardy wager. Bye for now. The Jeopardy All-Star Game sound cuts are courtesy of Jeopardy.
This edition of The Game Show was created and produced by Bradley Clarke and was recorded at the WRHU studios. This is Austin Angelo speaking.
The Game Show is a Bradley Clarke production. Get your game on.